Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon, and welcome to the Hindi Names Pronunciation Workshop. This is a multi-collaborative effort housed within NDI's ISA office with the Center for the Study of Languages and Cultures, and led by our community members who are going to introduce themselves in just a moment. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce Stuti. She was our Fulbright Foreign Language Teaching Assistant housed within the CSLC for the last academic year. And she's going to be our leader today as we go through the workshop. Stuti, I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself to the group.
Thank you, Mary. Hi, everybody. I'm Stuti. And as Mary said, I was the FLTA at CSLC last year. And we were supposed to do this workshop in spring this year, but we couldn't. So I'm really happy to be back. And thank you, Mary and Zaina, for having me.
And we are also joined today by our Director for Initiatives at our Mumbai Gateway in India. Dheeraj, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Dheeraj Mehra. As Mary mentioned, I'm the Director for Initiatives in India for Notre Dame's Mumbai Global Center, based out of India. So I am here at 9:30 p.m. and I'm really looking forward to this workshop. When I spoke to Zaina about this, this is something that really excited me, just introducing Hindi to so many people on our campus. So I'm looking forward to today.
Great. And thank you for joining us. I know that's a difficult time difference. All right. Really quickly, before I turn it over to Stuti, I wanted to give a little bit of context for where these name pronunciation workshops originated from and how they're designed. So this is our second go of name pronunciation workshops. We also did one in spring of 2023 on pronouncing Mandarin names, and that one is also recorded, and we can send that out in the resources as well. And really, this came from a desire or a perceived desire of the people that we was speaking to in our community to develop their confidence and understanding of how to more accurately or precisely pronounce, what we would consider foreign names on an American campus. So our workshops started with Mandarin, and now we're moving to Hindi. And we have full plans to continue, and they focus mostly on key ways that we can enhance our confidence and accuracy in pronouncing our community members' names for names that originate from languages that are relevant to the community. So Zaina can step in and correct me if I'm wrong, but China and India are number 1 and number 2, respectively, top contributing countries for international students at Notre Dame's main campus. But I also encourage everybody joining us today to think about the functionality or importance outside of just this campus context. It's not only our international students, but we have plenty of staff and faculty, postdocs, visiting scholars, community members in South Bend or in our global network, in our personal lives, where these skills and enhancing our own understandings and pronunciations to more accurately to name our peers can be useful. So we're going to start with a little bit of context from Stuti and Dheeraj, and then Stuti will lead us through some useful information on the Hindi language and picking out key points that we can work on to more accurately pronounce our peers and colleagues' names. And then we'll actually have plenty of time to practice at the end as a group, as well as in breakout rooms, to try to lower that threshold for performance anxiety. And as we conclude, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. And then, as I mentioned, we'll send the follow-up email with resources where you can continue working on some of these skills in your own time as you're able. All right, so Stuti, I'm going to stop talking and let you begin your session here.
All right, thank you, Mary. So when Mary proposed the idea of a Hindi name pronunciation workshop, I was very excited about it, and especially because our names are linked so closely to who we are. So whenever somebody asks us to talk about ourselves, we'll always start with, "Oh, my name is," and then go from there. So that's how important names are, and it makes a difference when somebody actually tries to pronounce your name. No matter if they get it, perfect. That's I don't think that's the goal. If they try, that matters a lot. So while I was at the CSLC, Mary tried. The people at the CSLC tried, and that's what makes all the difference in the world. And then I come from India, and well, as we have here, words have meanings and names have power. In India, most names have a meaning attached to it. So my name is Stuti. It means a prayer song. We have Dheeraj with us today. His name means patience. So when you take somebody's name correctly, or at least try to, you're also in a way validating them and showing that you care enough to know about them to just say the name correctly. It's a small thing, but it makes a huge difference.
So I wanted to explore a little bit into both you and Dheeraj's experience. If there's been maybe a time when either it has mattered, like you mentioned, that somebody has authentically tried to pronounce your name, or on maybe the flip side of that, any context you feel comfortable sharing, what is the impact on you personally if somebody doesn't try, or tries to maybe, what people's interactions with you have been, maybe reflecting on your time as an FLTA with us last year, or other contexts.
So in the States, when I went out and got a takeout, people won't understand my name. Even if I said Stuti, they were like, "What?" So sometimes I just try to these Starbucks names. So I would go with Sophie usually. Once I went with Claire, just because the fancy struck. And then the person was like, Claire. And I was just standing there because even though I'd given that name, I did not relate to it. That was not me at all, even for that 1 second. And then my friend, he had to nudge me and be like, "That's you, go, it's your order." So, even though we try to make things easier for others, sometimes the name means nothing to you. It's not you at all. I sometimes try to go with Stu. It's just the first half of my name, makes things easier. It's still me in certain ways. But again, Mary, when you tried to actually pronounce my name correctly, that made a lot of difference, because it just showed that you cared. You cared enough to pronounce it correctly and it shows where I come from. It's also my heritage, it's my identity. So it all comes together in just one word, I would say.
If I can add a bit to that. So I've had the opportunity to actually be connected with Notre Dame now for almost 35 years. I was an undergraduate student, and now I'm working with Notre Dame. And I've actually seen the transition that people at the university have actually had with names. When I was a student, I guess being an Indian student on campus was a unique experience because there weren't that many. And my name was shortened from Dheeraj to D-Rock. Because people could not pronounce, Dheeraj could not look at it. And culturally, at that time, being young, it didn't really matter so much. The same friends of mine that I know today no longer call me D-Rock, and they try and get my name right, and they're like Dheeraj or Dheeraj as far as it goes. But more important than that, I think with the diversity that we brought on campus, I think this necessity of being able to properly pronounce or name people with how they are comfortable being named is also important. As an 18-year-old, D-Rock sounded great, but as a 50-year-old, you really don't want to be called, you want to be known by your own name. So I think that transition that I've seen at the university also is something I just wanted to highlight and bring out, to this group.
That's fantastic. I'm glad that it seems the change for the better over time. And I think certainly it's insightful for what maybe some of our students, especially as undergrads, are, still in the midst of forming their identities and who they are, versus, maybe a colleague or a faculty member who has a much stronger sense of who they are and what how to call them. Stuti, I'm going to let you take back the lead here.
All right, thank you. If you could click again, yeah. So the question, why Hindi? Why the Hindi name pronunciation workshop? Well, Hindi is one of the most widely spoken languages in the world. It comes at the third place after English and Mandarin Chinese. So Hindi-speaking people with Hindi names or Hindi origin names, you'll find them everywhere, I would say. So I think that's one good effort. Also, it's not only spoken in India. We think of Hindi, we think of India. Of course, a large number of Hindi speakers is concentrated in India, but Hindi and related languages are also spoken in other countries like Nepal, Fiji, Mauritius, UAE, so on and so forth. And Urdu, which is Hindi sister language. So Urdu and Hindi come from the same language, which was Hindustani. Now it's branched into two. It also has 230 million speakers worldwide, which increases the number of Hindi speakers. So Urdu is one of the official languages in Pakistan right now. And finally, there's more than 800,000 Hindi speakers in the USA. So we just talk about the States, more than 800,000 Hindi speakers, which is again a very significant number. And at Notre Dame campus, I ran into, I taught Hindi, so I worked with some Indian origin students, but I also met some people who teach at Notre Dame, who work at Notre Dame, who have names which have Hindi origin. So yeah, that's the reason why a Hindi name pronunciation workshop. Now, before we get into the Hindi language, I would like to ask you, can you think of any Hindi or Hindi origin words you already know? Maybe any words in English that you might use, that you might have heard of?
Can they just put it in the chat?
Yes, for sure. So let's see. So we have Dheeraj. Yes, that is correct, which Zena says chai, definitely chai, which is tea. Basmati, so basmati, the rice, definitely. Anything else? Any other words that you might use frequently in English and you don't really think of them? Definitely the places, Kolkata, Chennai, Pune, for sure. Yoga, or yog, as we would say in Hindi. Anything else? Namaste. So that's how we say hello in Hindi. That's the greeting. So namaste. Zen. I don't think Zen comes from Hindi, from what I know. Might be, but I don't think so. All right. I think that's about it. Let's see what words, some words that we do use in English. So we have jungle, which comes from the Hindi jungle, which means a forest or a jungle. Pajamas, pajama in Hindi, a loose-fitting garment. Chutney, again, the same word in Hindi, chutney. Pashmina in English, pashmina in Hindi for the fabric. And of course, as Zena said, we have chai, karma or karm in Hindi. The word avatar in Hindi, which is avatar, which means an incarnation. Definitely masala, which is just a spice. Shampoo, So shampoo comes from the Hindi word champi, which we know what shampoo is. Champi means like a head massage. Kashmir, or which comes from the Hindi word Kashmir, which refers to the Kashmir region. We have mantra or mantra in Hindi. And finally, Juggernaut, which comes from Jagannath, which is this huge chariot of the god Jagannath. So I just wanted to put this out there just to show you that you know some Hindi words already. You use them, in your everyday speech. So Hindi is not as distant as it might seem. Because of historical reasons, it's seeped into English and it's being used. So yeah, just wanted to put that out there. Is garam Hindi? Yes, garam is Hindi. Garam means warm or hot. So you might have heard of garam masala, which is a kind of spice mix from India. Okay, now let's get to the technical stuff, I would say. So I would like to start with the Hindi writing system and the Devanagari script. So in Hindi, we have 10 vowels, and I'll keep it very simple. I've tried to make this workshop very simple and not technical, I would say, so that everybody can follow along. So we have 10 vowels, 5 long and 5 short. So when I say long and short, we have E, and then E, maybe A, so just longer and shorter sounds. We have 36 consonants, and again, nasalization is possible in Hindi. So you can nasalize almost everything. If you see on the screen, you have the Hindi alphabet. So we put the vowels at the very beginning, followed by the consonants, and then at the very end, we have some conjunct consonants. Now, if you see the little word at the top, it says Hindi in the Hindi script. Something important over here is vowel diacritics. That means we put accent marks to combine vowel and consonant sounds in Hindi in the script. Maybe if we can move on.
So would this be similar to, I mean, for a native English speaker, for instance, if they're thinking a diacritic to combine a sound, this could be something like when we do contractions or something almost, right? Like if you say you're writing in the word like y'all, right? Or can't, or I'm, right? There's the actual orthography showing you that it's not I am. This is now a different pronunciation.
Exactly. Yeah, it would be something similar. But if we see on the next slide, I think I'd be able to explain it much better. So in the blue, I say Hindi kaise likhte hai, how to write Hindi. And I have 2 words here. The first is namaste. So when you transcribe it into the Roman script, you would have Namaste, right? So you have all the letters of the alphabet. So whatever this word requires, put together, and that's how they make the sound. But in Hindi, you have the n sound, the m sound, half the s sound, and then when you notice the th sound, to make the te, you add the accent mark on top of that sound to make it te. So instead of having vowels and consonants right next to each other, when they combine, when the consonant sound changes, we just add an accent mark, to put it very simply. So for Mary, in English, it would be M-A-R-Y. We have 4 letters happening here. In Hindi, you have the sound M, the sound R, and then to make me, you put the accent for the A sound, and then you have the R sound, and to make ri, you just add the accent for the E sound. That's how it becomes Mary.
So it's the same accent here, and thank you for using my name. Actually, I knew how to write it because you had written it for me before, but so this is the same vowel accent, the A sound in Mary as the A sound in Namaste?
Exactly, it's the same. So all vowels have a specific accent to go with it, an accent mark, a diacritic to go with it. And you can add them to all consonants. And now something important, Hindi script is phonetic, and that is important because when we transcribe Hindi into English, that is something we try to, I would say, stay faithful to try to make it sound as phonetic as possible, because that's how the Hindi script is.
Thank you.
And now, before we talk about the transcription in the Roman script, just one more thing. All Hindi consonants have an inherent sound. So, you know, if we say hut in English, it has an sound. I have given the IPA symbol for that. All Hindi consonants have that sound inherent in them, right? That's why a lot of times you would see in Namaste, you have N-A-M-A, but these A sounds are just representing the inherent A sound in the consonant that's already there in the Hindi alphabet. And that's why, for example, when you say my name Stuti, it's just S-T because there's just half the S sound. It's not S-Tuti, it's just Stuti. For Namaste, it's Namaste, it's not Namaste. That's the reason the A is there, but it's an inherent sound with all consonants.
So you would
Any
use
questions at this point? Yes, Mary. Sorry.
the inherent sound, like in hut, is like if you don't have any of the accent marks or the diacritics, then that's your baseline sound that you would.
Exactly. Exactly. So I think that is something we need to keep in mind before we move on. Any other questions about the script?
Can you pronounce your name one more time?
Stuti. So it's half the S sound, so Stuti, S-T-U, and that is softer, it's a softer T and it's shorter U. Ooh, so Stuti. And now something important about transcribing Hindi into English. So unlike Mandarin, we do not have a fixed system for it. So we try to go with phonetics mostly, and also due to historical reasons, sometimes the transcriptions remain as they were, you know, at the time of the British, at the time of the colonization. So that's one thing. But again, as I said, we try to make it as phonetic as possible. So that's something we need to remember. So now, firstly, the vowel sounds. When it's a short vowel sound, you'll usually have a single vowel in English. So like the name Aditi, it's not Aditi, it's just Aditi. It's shorter vowel sounds. Like my name, Stuti, just one U, one I, short U and short E, so Stuti. For the longer vowel sounds, usually we would have two vowels together, like a double E, an EI, double O, so on and so forth. So like the name Anoop, we have a double O, so it's Anoop as compared to, again, Stuti, which is U and U. So we usually have double vowels. Now I say usually because, again, there's no fixed rule. So people are free to write their names as they want to, but these are general guidelines which will make things easier for you, I would say. So that's it for short vowels and long vowels. Now for the E sound, so the E, a single E would be pronounced as A, as in de, so Suresh, and the single O as the O in door, so Manoj. Suresh, Manoj. A and O. Now, this is a little tricky. As I told you, due to the inherent A sound, most Hindi consonants, when you transcribe it, in English, they're pronounced as in hut. Again, I have the IPA symbol for you. But that is not always the case. sometimes it might be pronounced as ah. So if we have the name Amit, Amol, Amandeep, it's just a. In Dheeraj, it's just a, right? But it's very common. It's not uncommon to have it be like the ah sound far. So Subhash, Priyanka. So it's very common. Sometimes you have both happening in the same name, which can be a bit tricky. And a lot of people, they do use double A's. You know, if, for Subhash, they might write it with a double A, which makes things easier for us. But here, both things are possible. And I think the key remains to just ask the person if you're unsure. So is it Amol? Is it Amol? It's better to just ask the person and be like, hey, can you just tell me what's the right way to pronounce it? Because here there's no hard and fast rules that I can tell you.
Can I ask you to pronounce Amandeep again?
Exactly as you said it, Mary. Amandeep.
Amandeep. So this,
Amandeep.
it's the same O sound. It's not Mandeep, right? It's not the and far. It's the same Amandeep.
As Amandeep. It's both same sounds.
Interesting.
And then in the other name, we have Priyanka. Both of them are the ah sounds. But if you notice here, the first A is nasalized. So Priyanka.
Mm.
And the other one is not.
Stuti, can I ask you a question?
Definitely.
Are there patterns of like mispronunciations that you or maybe your friends maybe have heard Americans mispronounce in terms of names? Like I'm thinking of if I saw the name Manoj, I would say Manoj, but you said that it's actually the short vowel. Is it that we often overemphasize the vowels? Like we would say, some people might call you Stuti instead of Stuti. Are there any patterns that you can speak to?
I think, yeah, there's this, I would say, as you pointed out, Zaina, this, elongation of the vowel sounds. That is a repetitive pattern. And also with the A sound, because there are two possibilities. So people tend to be like, maybe it is in the name Aman, maybe it's a man or a man, right? So that those are some, I would say, repetitive patterns. So again, for Amandeep, just ask, how do you pronounce your name? I think that's something that remains important. But yes, elongation of the vowels is something important. And then when we come to consonants, a lot of the times, that's what I noticed in the States. People tend to pronounce the names with a sharper sound. They would call me Stuti or Studi instead of Stuti. It's a softer the, not the harder the. Or so just that difference as well. People tend to use harder sounds instead of softer ones. On that note, we can move to the consonants, Mary, actually. So this is something we were discussing right now. We have hard consonant sounds in Hindi, of course. We'll see it on the next slide as well. But they're pretty uncommon. They do exist in names, but they're pretty uncommon. So D would be as the, a softer the, and not d as in day. So it's Dinesh, Stuti. It's not Dinesh. That's what an American would say, a Dinesh or Studi. But it's softer sounds usually in names. And I think it's a very safe bet to just go for the softer sound as it is. Now for the aspirated sounds, we just transcribe it, the consonant and H. So I think Dheeraj's name is a very great example for it. You have the DH sound, which makes it the. It can also be the, but again, as I said, hard consonant sounds are uncommon. So it's a combination of a soft consonant sounds with the aspirated part of it. So that's what makes it Dheeraj or Bhupendra. Now, these sounds do exist in English as well. It's not something we really think of. But if we say the word pin versus spin, you hear it. So when you say pin, you feel that puff of air come out of your mouth. That's what makes it aspirated, as compared to spin, where you don't feel it. So these differences do exist in English, but they're not very pronounced. So it's not something we really pay attention to, but they're there and it's doable, I would say. Definitely, there are some phonemes or distinct sounds which do not exist in English, or as it goes in different languages, we have different sounds which you might not even hear if you don't speak that language, because the differences are so subtle. Mary, before we go to the next slide, could we go back to the alphabet?
This one?
Yeah, thank you. So here the sounds are laid out together, and I'll pronounce them for you, and you try to make out the difference if you can. So you have k, k, g, g. It's the same family of sound. I would say k, then it's aspirated k, g, and g again aspirated. If we go to another thing, th, th. So we have th and then th aspirated, the aspirated. So that's how it goes in Hindi. And p, b, b. Again, that's how it's laid out in Hindi. We have unaspirated and aspirated sounds, one after the other, I would say.
And I would point out too, from the perspective of somebody who hasn't ever learned Hindi, and I think you give me too much credit, that I tried to pronounce your name. I'll say I tried. I know I've many times mispronounced your name. Even after knowing you for a long time, it's hard to like retrain your brain. Like even here in this workshop, I see this name here, for instance, and my brain turns that into Dinesh, right? But I think pointing out some of these places where we know that, English speakers might have difficulty, like with the aspiration and the vowels, because vowels are always something in languages that are going to change the meaning of a word, I think, more, or the pronunciation of a word more. Even just consciously being aware of it so that we can, practice on our own, but also kind of, see where we might be having issues. Sorry, Neeraj, please.
Yeah, a place where I found a lot of times the mispronunciation comes out is when there are common words within, especially names. So when you just said Dinesh, it's because of the word din. You see that often when people pronounce my name as Dhiraj because of the word Raj at the end of it, which is a word that's used often. So you'll see it with Stuti as well, with the word tat in the middle, so Stuti. So a lot of times the mispronunciation actually comes because you're moving from a phonetic to a non-phonetic alphabet, so to speak. So you try and pick out the commonalities that you see, the 3 letters or the 4 letters that make up another word. Pen is another good example that you would look at many things. So Dinesh becomes Dinesh with the word din rather than the actual, phonetic or non-phonetic transcribing from Hindi to English.
That's a good point. Thank you. And I think that's totally normal, right? Especially when we're unfamiliar and maybe having a little bit of performance anxiety where we don't want to mispronounce anybody's name, and that makes us tense up a little bit more, which makes it harder to relax maybe some of the muscles in our mouth that we need relaxed to pronounce softer vowels and things like this as well. One thing too, I'd point out that we have like the paper test when we're talking about, just to go back to the aspirated and unaspirated consonants, which we have in English. We use both, Stuti's example for pin and spin, right? We usually aspirate at the beginning of a word, but those 2 different sounds in the English speaker mind is just P. It's the same sound, even though our mouths are actually doing something different. And so one thing that I think helps if I'm practicing on my own is having like a tissue paper works best, something not too thick. But if you hold it close to your mouth and then you aspirate, you'll move the paper. So you can do like pin and it moves, and then you do spin and it doesn't. So if you're practicing, to aspirate like tiraj, I didn't aspirate it right because I didn't move the paper. So I think that's a nice little trick just from my perspective and trying to understand that these are actually different sounds in Hindi that an English speaker, I think, would only hear as one sound often.
Exactly. And just to further that, if we talk about these sounds, we have p and b, but then we also have p and b. So again, for these sounds, either you put your hand in front of your mouth, when it's aspirated, you put your hand here, and when you feel the puff of air, you're aspirating it right. Or Mary's test with a piece of paper works too. And then again, in Hindi, we go t and d, which can also go th and d, and so on and so forth. So you have k, k. So k, not aspirated. K, it is aspirated. It's deeper in your throat. And then you have g and g. Again, you might or might not be able to hear the differences, but if you don't, it's totally normal because these might not exist in English or whatever languages you speak, or even if they do exist, they might not be very obvious. But again, as I said, and as I think we all say, the key is to try, and that's what makes the difference.
And now if we know more what we're listening for, for our own notes on the side of our rosters or something, like however, you don't have to learn IPA to get it right, but it's like, oh, okay, and I know this is something that there's a difference. It sounded like they aspirated it, so next time I pronounce it, I'm going to try to go for the t sound, right?
Exactly. So right now I'm teaching in France, and it happens to me all the time. I don't know how to pronounce so many of the names, so I just make a little note at the side of the roster, and so that I can remember next time how to pronounce that better. And I don't get it right all the time, but again, I think people recognize when you make an effort, and that makes a difference. And of course, asking is always a good option. There's nothing wrong with asking.
Mary, can you confirm what IPA is and maybe some of these terms on the screen?
Sure. Sorry. So IPA being the International Phonetic Alphabet. So part of what when Stuti was talking about how Hindi is transcribed into English, and there are certain rules and they don't always apply, and it's mostly phonetic, but things change over time or people spell things differently. The International Phonetic Alphabet is a much more technical system that usually like linguists and people using linguistic backgrounds will use, because it helps identify the singular sounds and all of the attributes of that sound. So when we're talking about, like something like plosive versus aspirated plosive, right? So plosive is just what we're going to call something where you explode the air out of your mouth, to b, g, right? These sounds we have in English, we have plosives, right? And then being distinct sounds from the aspirated plosive that, you would fail or pass the paper test, would move the paper. And then here, the more technical terms up here are where in your mouth you're making that sound. So p and b happen here at your lips. So it's bilabial. You're using two lips to make those sounds. The same is true for if you're making the aspirated plosive of those sounds for p and b, right? We'll skip labial dental because we don't have anything there. Dental alveolar would be your alveolar ridge is if you have like that bump in the top of your mouth where you're thinking like that's kind of like the middle of the top of my mouth, the alveolar ridge is the place kind of in front of that. So something dental alveolar would be kind of between your teeth and that little ridge behind. So that's where in English we do t, right? And the. And then in Hindi too, we didn't touch on this one so much, Stuti, and you can jump in here. There's a retroflex of that. So it's the placement that hasn't changed, but the position of your tongue instead of touching your mouth straight forward, kind of curls back a little bit, and that actually changes the sound that comes out of your mouth. So you could have the difference between like t and d, right? Where you curl your tongue.
Exactly. We would have t, t, d, d. So t, t, d, d, and then we also have r and r, which is a difference you might or might not be able to hear, because my students, they struggle a lot with this because they could not hear it at all.
And that's totally fine. I mean, like, even me knowing this, like, I'm hearing you say these sounds, and I'm like, in my brain, this sounds very much the same to me. Like, I know, you know, because we don't differentiate between a retroflex or an aspirated of these specific phonemes in English. So our brains kind of like figure out which ones we need by time we're, you know, toddlers. And then we kind of forget the rest, and it's much harder for us to suss out the differences in the rest. And that's why we have accents and things when we learn new languages. But I think seeing it and kind of knowing what your mouth is doing and what the air coming out of your mouth is doing can be really helpful for you to try to hear the differences and to try to replicate them when we're going for, again, not perfection, but just improvement from, you know, the baseline sound that we otherwise would have made. We can do some group practice. Stuti can lead us in some group practice, and then we'll open up the breakout rooms for us to individually practice with each other some other common Hindi names.
All right. So here I've tried to take some famous people of Indian origin or people who are from India. So we'll practice together. Let's see who the first person is.
And if it's okay with everybody, I'll make a bit of a fool of myself. I encourage you to keep your mics muted. You can keep your videos off, but practice along. And then for the benefit of the recording and lowering everybody's expectations of my own pronunciation, I'll be Stuti's model student here.
So Mary, I'm looking at you. I would like you to go first. What do you think?
Okay.
So let's remember that it's going to be a softer consonant. We do have an inherent A sound.
So could I say something like Sundar Pichai?
Perfect. But if you remember the U sound, it would be a short vowel sound.
So instead of, I said Sundar, so
Mhm.
like the U
U
sound
sound.
in your name,
Exactly.
like Sundar Pichai.
Exactly. So Sundar Pichai.
Sundar Pichai.
Perfect. Now we have this actress over here. Just a little hint. Here the A's, they are longer vowel sounds.
So Priyanka Chopra.
That is correct. So Priyanka Chopra. That's again a very popular actor. And again, the A's are longer vowel sounds. So like A's.
Before I try this one, Michelle had a good question about how do we know which syllables we're supposed to stress? Is there a stress pattern typically in Hindi?
That's something I looked towards, and for names, I really couldn't come up with, you know, a typical pattern, so as to say. So I looked at a few names, and I'm like, okay, it's like the first syllable that's stressed, and then there were so many exceptions that I'm like, no, we cannot come up with a rule. I don't know what Dheeraj thinks about it, but that was my you know, my impression that we cannot come up with like a rule, so as to say, for the names.
It's difficult to come up with rules because, you know, my name is a good example. You can write it DHI or DHEE, but in Hindi, it's pronounced the same. So it's very difficult to really come up with any rule when you don't have a fixed transcribing system, because one is, as I said, you know, as Stuti mentioned, a phonetic language and the other is not. So in terms of which syllables to stress, I think it comes more by practice than by actually saying that you'll always stress this particular syllable when you see it. You know, it's like the I before E except after C. You know, something that we learned about English in school in India. So there's, I think it comes more by practice, at least where the Hindi to English transcribing goes.
Yeah, I would say so because again, yeah, I did look at it, Mary. Actually, this question where the stress lies in the names, what's syllable to stress, and I really couldn't come up with one particular answer to that. So I think, as you just said, practice is the key.
So if I were going to pronounce this person's name, I would say, and recognizing that the H's after the K's mean that I'm supposed to aspirate those consonants,
Mhm.
right?
Exactly.
The H after the, right? So Shahrukh
Mhm.
Khan.
Yes, Shah Rukh Khan.
Shahrukh
So
Khan.
there's a movie by this actor, and he repeats. So that the movie is set in the States, and he says Khan from the epiglottis. It's like Khan. So
Khan.
Shah Rukh Khan. He's a very popular actor. So yes, great job, Mary. You're doing perfectly so far.
And I think that's a good example of the stress too. So I said Shahrukh when it's Shahrukh,
hmm
right? So I
Again,
put it
because
on
the
the
U
second
is the
first.
shorter U sound. It's not Shah Rukh. It's
Right.
Shah Rukh.
Shahrukh.
It's shorter. That is a very a famous writer. She's an author from India.
So thinking about the A sound, the sound.
Mm-hmm.
So before I went through this workshop with you, I would have said Arundhati, but now I'm going to say Arundhati.
Very close, but both the A sounds here are the inherent sounds. So it's Arundhati.
Arundhati.
Mm-hmm. And Roy.
Dhati.
So Arundhati.
Okay.
All right. Now I have a list of 5 names each. And before we try them out, before you all try it out yourself, just this thing which applies to the workshop, but also for when you're at work, when you meet with a person, if you're not sure, just ask. And if you don't get it correctly, if you don't get it perfectly, that's fine. But always try, and that's what makes the difference. So just that little thing before we delve into the practice.
Okay. So I'm going to pause the recording so we can do the breakout rooms. So it's a little less pressure. And if you can't speak, that's fine. And, we can still, hear our peers or practice on our own and whisper to ourselves. And for the benefit of anybody watching the recording later, there'll be the full list here. And then I encourage you to pause the recording and go through and practice. Okay, so for the benefit of the recording, Stuti is going to model some of the names for us, and then we can re-practice based on our modeling.
So these are some names which are very common. So I took some common names. So the first one is Amit Sharma. Amit Sharma. The second one, it's with the K sound, so the aspirated sound, Khyati Gupta. So this is a common surname. People tend to pronounce it as Gupta, but it's Gupta. Manoj Shastri. Manoj Shastri. Sanjay Singh. Sanjay Singh. Singh is a very common surname for Indians, and it's the G sound. So you have G, which is not non-aspirated, and G, which is aspirated. And we have Vanshika Patel. Vanshika Patel. Ishan Thakur, Geetika Verma, Bhanu Pratap Singh, it's a long one, Bhanu Pratap Singh, Abhay Yadav, Bhavna Agarwal. So in Hindi, the V and the W sound, V and V, the difference doesn't exist. So if you see a V or a W, it's going to be a V sound. So Bhavna Agarwal. So it's the V sound. Lastly, we have Arjun Roy, Prakash Pandey, Gayatri Devi, Fatima Ahmed, and lastly, Lavanya Debnath. Lavanya Debnath. So this is something you might notice, people using double vowels for longer sounds, but also in the same name in Debnath. It's a single A, but it's still the longer sound. So just something I wanted to put out there. Again, asking is what will help you out over here.
Dheeraj, would you say your name, please? It looks like someone is asking.
Sure, Christine is asking. It's Dheeraj Mehra. Dheeraj
So
Mehra.
I think Dheeraj's name is also a good example. So we have the A, which is like the inherent and then when he says Mehra, it's the longer A.
And then would either of you check the chat too? We have some participants submitted names that they would like to hear you pronounce so that they can model for them. And I will also bookmark this part of the recording. So when we send it out to everybody, you can skip to this part and kind of just like play it on repeat if you like.
All right. Dheeraj, do you want to go ahead or should I?
Go ahead, Stuti. You've got a much better pronunciation than I do.
All right. So the names we have here, we have Sushrut, so Sushrut. Then, okay, so here the spelling that I see tells me it might be a name from the south of the country. So I, as a Hindi speaker, would say Shweta, but it might be Sweta. Yeah, I would say Shweta as a Hindi speaker. Then we have Neelima. Again, the next name, Subhajit. As a Hindi speaker, I would say Shubhjit or Shubhajit, depending on the name. And then the last one is Deepak. Deepak.
For the first name that she said, it's the long oo sound, even though it's just the one U though, right? So that kind of goes back to your point.
Sushrut.
Sushrut. Okay, so it's not
Sushrut.
Sushrut.
It's not Sushrut.
Right,
Sushrut.
okay.
And then person asked Neelima. Neelima. Or you can also say Neelima. Again, you'd have to ask them how to say it, but Neelima works fine.
I mean, even you said as there's a difference between the pronunciation or the spelling from, like northern regions or different regions of India and in the south. Is it common between Hindi speakers to say, like, is this, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Between Hindi speakers, no, I wouldn't say so. We know the names and we pronounce them, but when it's from different parts of the country, yeah, we might need to ask sometimes because it's different languages. So even though Hindi is the most widely spoken language in India, it's not the only one. We have multiple languages.
And this is just a matter of personal opinion, but I would like to hear your input. We've mentioned many times throughout, just ask, right? It's okay to ask, like it's okay to try and then ask. How many times is too many times for one person to ask you? Is there such thing as too much, right? At some
I think there is such a thing as too much, because what we are emphasizing on is making an effort. And if you need to ask it every 5 minutes for a week straight, that means you're not making an effort, right? So I'm more than happy to tell you my name, once, twice, 5 times. But if you see me every day, you ask me every day, I'm like, yeah, you don't care. You're just asking me for the sake of asking. So I think it's okay to ask, but it's also important to remember what they told you. And if you see them after like 5 months, sure, go ahead and ask them again and be like, oh, that's what I remember. So that's important because asking cannot exist in a void. It has to yield some results.
So hopefully you all learned something and you enjoyed this session. This event is part of a semesterly series that we try to host on name pronunciation with different languages each semester. This is led by ND students and the Fulbright Foreign Language Teaching Assistants. Stuti was kind enough to lead today's session, and we'll have another FLTA leading the next one. All of the recordings are posted online, and we'll be sure to send out the link to everyone who registered. And as well as with other links to other resources. And then finally, we're really excited to announce that the Spring 2024 pronunciation workshop will be for Korean names. And so we'll be working with our Korean FLTA for that workshop. So super excited for that. We'll be sending out more information in the spring. And then finally, we just have a feedback form that we ask for you all to fill out, scanning the QR code and letting us know what you thought about today's session. So thank you all so much for attending. Feel free to re-review the recording, and we look forward to reading your feedback.